Everybody knows Porsche has engines at the rear. But 40 years ago, there was a model range that was completely different. (1976) was the dawn of the Transaxle era. Engine at the front, transmission in the trunk, water-cooled. A sacrilege for true Porsche fans, so what was the concept? Transaxle combines transmission and axle. Power is transmitted from engine to rear axle by a drive shaft that goes through the car. The advantage of this design is better weight distribution. Porsche built the ideal combination of sports car and everyday vehicle. How this series came to be designed is a curious story. Porsche and Volkswagen planned to build transaxles together. VW pulled out at the last minute and only supplied components. Porsche courageously decided to continue the project. This was the birth of the Porsche 924, which cost only 23,000 Deutschmarks for the entry-level model. It was a modular Porsche. Engine and transmission were from the Audi 100, the driveshaft from the VW Beetle. The Porsche 928 followed in 1977. The V8 Gran Turismo was the new Porsche flagship. The 1980s were dominated by the 944, one of the most successful sports cars of its day. Over 150,000 cars were sold, mainly in the USA. The Porsche 968 in 1991 marked the high point of the Transaxle era. It featured the four-cylinder engine with the most torque in the world. Many consider the 968 the ideal sports car. So few of this series were produced that some model variants are now collector's items. The great Transaxle era ended in 1995, and the Boxster era dawned. Although the Transaxle design was considered an aberration by many fans, consumers loved it. Ordinary motorists made their dream of a Porsche come true. Nearly 400,000 Transaxle Porsches were sold. In the end, courage pays off.
It's one of the best handling cars I've ever driven. It was incredibly stiff, the chassis, and it just handled absolutely beautifully.
When it came to the rain, the car was incredible. I don't remember ever having a moment in it. I mean, it was just so beautifully balanced. It only had 330, 40 horsepower. So when you came out of the corner with the grip and the tires, it was just a perfect package for that one race.
Being involved with it for so long, it's wonderful to me personally, but for the whole world, it just stands out as obviously the big race of its kind, head and shoulders above any other.
A couple of years after I joined Porsche, several years ago now, I was invited to go out to Germany on a program called Introduction to Porsche, where we got to see the museum and so on and so on. At the end of the trip, our Porsche colleagues tried to give every delegate from around the world a model sporting the flag of their country. So I was given this model of a 924, you know, carrying the Union Jack. And I remember looking at the time and not really realising that the reason they gave me that model was that was the only car ever that carried the Union Jack, and therefore there was no other model they could give me. And it sat on my shelf in my office for quite a long time until we realised we were coming around to the 40th anniversary of the launch of the 924 back in 1976. We were wondering how to really celebrate that milestone and get engaged with it, and I suddenly remembered this model on my shelf, and I started to wonder, where is this car, you know, what happened to it, where is it now, what condition is it in, can we get hold of it?
Until 76 they only had the 911 model, which was rear engine, air cooled, and all the customers of course were steeped in 911. And then the 924 came along, water cooled, front engine, transaxle, quite a new design, completely new in every way. And I think the purists thought, it's not a proper Porsche, it's, you know, like, what is it? Then I went to the Frankfurt show in September '79, and there the Carrera GT was presented. And the stylist, Tony Lapine, said to me, "We're going to run 3 cars at Le Mans next year." And I went back to Reading to my boss, John Aldington, and said, "Do you think we could sponsor one and put Tony John and Andy Rouse in it?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that." What they said to me was, "Can you get a name?" And I thought, well, I might be able to. And I rang Derek Bell and said, "What do you think?" He rang me back almost the next day and said, I've talked to Bob and I've thought about it. Yes, I'll do it. And the next thing I knew, they were going to run 3 cars. Going to be a German car with Jürgen Barth, British car for our 2 drivers, and an American car for Al Holbert and Peter Gregg. And suddenly it was all taking off.
You're going to have some cars that you like more than others, and what I really liked about this one was the fabulous way it handled. It was just a very effective machine and very underrated by people who hadn't been directly involved with it. It was a very good car, and I did like it.
We worked out who we needed to talk to, and we made some inquiries and discovered that indeed the car did still exist. It was around, and it was kind of gathering dust in a cage in Germany. So we decided we would unveil the car to the press and to the drivers. It was just so exciting, such a proud moment, and moments like that you'll remember forever, really.
Well, first of all, I didn't expect to see the car again, having stepped out of it in 1980.
I was amazed to be invited to the Porsche Experience Centre for that press launch that day, because I really never thought I'd see this car again. It had disappeared. I'd heard some fraudster in Spain claimed he'd got it, but I knew it was hidden away in the depths of some vault in Stuttgart.
Porsche history is very important. It's the core of the Porsche brand, and you have to take good care of your history, and without history you have no future. We have a secret storage facility where we store all the cars which we do not have on display and which we don't sell around the world at the moment. The 924 GTP is an iconic race car from the early 1980s. It was a Le Mans participant with a pretty good result, and it's a quite iconic car because it shows how close motorsports and production are at Porsche.
When we saw the car, we realised something must have happened to it post the race at Le Mans. There were clearly some modifications had been done to the car. There were items missing on the car, and clearly it had been elsewhere and used for other things after the race.
It's what we call a sleeping beauty, and you can see many marks, little damages at the car. It's completely unrestored, and it's like a time capsule. The restoration of a classic race car is always a big challenge because the cars are unique, they're prototypes, they're one of a kind, so you cannot just go to the warehouse and pick some parts. But I think if you have a lot of passion to detail, the result will be amazing.
We talked a lot about how to present the car. The view was this is really a time capsule, and so the decision was taken that that was the right way to present the car, just as it would have arrived at Le Mans in 1980 ready to go.
The difference between restoring a road car and a race car is that a lot of the time these cars were made from scratch. You know, they're bespoke items. They weren't built off a plan, so trying to track down original drawings or plans is very, very difficult.
It's finding these bespoke parts which Porsche use. They use the best that they could find. It's a beautiful machine, beautifully made, typically Porsche, function over form, built for lightweights, built for longevity, typically beautifully engineered. There are parts on the car which we're going to struggle to get, there's no question about that. Things like the instruments, a lot of the instruments were missing out of the car. We've managed to locate a couple, and the Americans generally tend to collect those parts rather than throw them away, and they've always sort of been interested in history. There are certain items where it's not being manufactured now, so we've got to make the decision as to whether we machine these parts up and get them machined, things like the oil pump, the water pump, or whether we spend more time trying to locate various items for it. So yeah, there are some challenges.
When we studied the car carefully after it had arrived to discover that the engine we had probably wasn't the original engine, and we would probably have to be a bit creative to try and work out how to get the car running, as it would have been in 1980 when we knew deep down that the engine we were working with wasn't the original. I could not believe my eyes. One day I was sat at my desk and an email came in from the head of the Porsche Museum to say he'd been contacted by a gentleman in the Czech Republic who was a well-known collector of Transaxle racing cars, who claimed to have the original engine. I could not believe it.
The engine in our car is from a later development, and it would be lovely for us to be able to put that original number 2 car back to its original specification, and this is a perfect opportunity.
It was quite nerve-wracking in a way, like, of course, not knowing whether when we got the engine back, you know, how easy is it going to be to marry this engine up to all the pipe work and so on.
Exchanging various parts, it means that we will be missing some parts and have to manufacture some parts at Porsche GB. It does put us back a little bit, obviously, because we have to do some more work. There's some more fabrication to do. We don't have any water pipes with this engine. We don't have the intercooler top. So there's quite a lot of fabrication which is now going to have to be done.
Despite all of that, it's definitely worth it to know that the engine is probably the engine that it deserved to have in and would have had in right from the start. That's really exciting. While all the Porsche centres were restoring their individual components, the guys at Road and Race had a job on to really make sure that the work to the body were done. And it was really lovely that kind of everybody working together, even though they were remote, everything kind of came together. I couldn't have asked for a better turn of fate, really, that everything came together at the right time and the car could go in to be painted, knowing that when it came out, everything would be ready, hopefully, to start gradually building the car back up again.
When we're repainting the car, we need to ensure that it's a very light amount of paint, so we can't build it up with primers and then flat it back and rebuild it up with more and more colour. We need to keep it very light, as the cars were built in the day. It's all different little bits and pieces which come together to try and make this car as original as possible.
Today we're at the Porsche Experience Centre here at Silverstone, and we're going to unveil our finished 924 GTP.
I did one race in it, and it was 40 years ago, and I've never seen one really since. And then to hear, in the last year that, Porsche Cars Great Britain have got hold of this and we're building it. Now you just look at it, it gives you quite an emotional feeling.
It's the greatest relief of sleepless nights and very, very hard work by all, really. So it's a very proud moment.
The timescale that we had, it was all really tight at the end, and it's just absolutely made it perfect. Fabulous. Amazing. All worthwhile.
It's fantastic. You've got to see the people here to kind of really understand the amount of passion that everyone has for this car. It's been a real journey. Everyone is just over the moon to see this car back as it was in 1980.
What it means to us in the UK, what it means to the team who've worked on it is everything, and to hear it and see it, it's a bit like seeing the past come back to life again.
Astonishing, what a job they've done. It feels right to me, and the look inside the cockpit was very nostalgic. Extraordinary feeling.
This is a bit like what I imagine it would be standing on top of Everest. For me to be here today, knowing that we're as close as we could have ever hoped to be, with a product that we're really proud of, as a really special day.